Well, I want to introduce a few more people to the group. You probably recognize some of them, and some of them may be new faces. But Crystal is hanging out with us. Crystal's the Executive Director of Student Strategy here at Orange. Hopefully you recognize her. And Ashley Marie Bohentz from the great state of Ohio. So we've got Illinois, Indiana, and Ohio covered right here. So that's great for the
all
Midwestern
the
fans
Midwesterners.
out there.
I love it.
That's right. So Ashley leads our XP3 middle school team. And then what might be a new face for you is Miss Leslie Mack. Leslie, how you doing today?
Good, I'm good. I'm pumped to be here.
See, one of my favorite things about being on Zoom calls with Leslie is you get to see a lot of awesome artwork in the background. And oftentimes it is her own artwork. Which I think is super, super cool. But Leslie has just joined the staff recently, and she is leading our XP3 high school team. So that is a name, and that is a face, and that is a voice that you are going to be hearing more and more often, and we can't be more excited to have her on this team. And so I wanted to bring you three on who on a regular daily basis are trying to figure out, when it comes to this idea of content, how do we best resource student leaders and student pastors and student ministries to be able to lead their students well and to be able to help them understand the truths of what it looks like to develop an authentic faith. And that has looked different in 2020. I still remember the conversation that we had. There's a Mexican restaurant in the little area that our offices are in. And I still remember when we found out that a bunch of schools and churches in Washington were shutting down in March. And we kind of had an emergency meeting and we were like, okay, what are we going to do for these churches in Washington or the Pacific Northwest? And then fast forward a month from there, and that's pretty much everybody. And kind of here we are again. And so I would love to hear from you guys. What have you learned? What has the XP3 team learned since we've kind of already gone through one round of digital ministry? Because I know you guys also have a lot of conversations, and we have some awesome contributors that help make XP3 happen that are leading their own ministries. Just what are some things, observations that you guys have had through round one of digital ministry that might be helpful for us looking into round two?
So you mentioned the contributors, and if you're new to this conversation, you should know that those of us on the screen do not make all the content that we produce. We work with 70 to 100 ministry leaders in any given season. And I know, Ashley, you have a group text going with a bunch of middle school leaders. Leslie and I have a group text going with a bunch of high school leaders. And the theme of that conversation lately has just been feeling like a failure, feeling like I'm missing the mark, like just feeling the weight. Yeah. And in so many ways, that's heartbreaking to me, because I look at those people in those group texts and the ministry leaders that we get to talk to as stinking heroes. Like, I can't help but imagine like 20 years from now, the new youth pastors are going to be talking about this generation of youth pastors. And like, can you imagine? Can you imagine what they had to lead through with no roadmap? And so I'm like, I think the beginning of the conversation has to be, none of us are failures. We're all new. And the first people to run a marathon are always the winners, because there's nobody else running it. So we're not failures. And in the spots where this is difficult, there is no curriculum, there is no resource, there is no downloadable thing that is suddenly going to make it all right and make it all easy. Like, it's just not that. None of this is easy. And so the stuff that we get to create, we hope is helpful. We work with a lot of ministry leaders to make it helpful, but the real winner, like the real difference maker, is going to be the person who is sitting at the church, connecting with leaders, connecting with parents, connecting with students. And that's sort of the people that we think are heroes on our team.
I was going to go ahead, Brett.
Well, I was just with what Crystal's saying. If anybody follows John Acuff, he's been talking about this idea of reminding ourselves that this is my first global pandemic. And I think that is just a really help. That this is my first time leading a student ministry through a global pandemic. You know what I mean? Reminding ourselves of that and giving ourselves some more grace, because I think that we assume that we should be doing more or more effective, or I don't know, but we just usually don't end up giving ourselves as much grace as we probably do other people. Sorry, Ash, go ahead.
No, I was just going to kind of tag on to something Crystal was saying about conversations with youth leaders. Along with like feeling like failures, there's just like a lot of grief to manage. But it seems like at times we're so busy, we can't even manage the grief. But I feel for all the ministry leaders who have poured their passion and their energy and their time in years, or, you know, recruiting people, and like your entire volunteer teams may feel like, oh my gosh, it's not the same anymore. I'm grieving what it used to be. The program that I spent 10 years building, and we had these students engaged, we had the volunteers and parents, and it was all working. And now I can't get it back to the same. And there's like so much grief, and I feel that grief. You know, things don't feel the same. I mean, I'm a small group leader for a group of 8th grade girls. I started leading them in the beginning of their 8th grade year. I've only met 3 of them in person. The rest is all digital or text, because they haven't been able to come to the outside gatherings that have been happening. And I understand that. And so there's grieving. People are tired. And I keep going back. I read that book by Brad Montague, which is like Becoming Better Grown-Ups. And there's something he said in it. And it was something, it just makes me think of this. He said, you don't have to become someone, you already are someone. And I think every youth leader that's tuning in right now just needs to be reminded that, like, I know you feel like you have to prove yourself, because when you move back inside or back outside or back to digital, one of the first questions is how many people are coming? And then it's, well, how many aren't coming? How many have we lost? And it's so easy to feel like that's what makes you somebody or makes you not somebody. And I feel like, I don't know, as content creators, we feel that tension too. Like, something that works for one of our partners doesn't work for another one of our partners, and it works for this context, but not that state. And we also feel like, oh my gosh, we want to help, but sometimes we don't know how, because we can't create everything. Yeah. So we're with you, I guess, is my point in all of this. We feel what you're feeling. It just might look a little different.
Ash, as you were saying that, I couldn't stop thinking about the conversations we had about the Christmas party. Like, we had these big plans of giving away a free Christmas party this year for all of our partners, and like all of these fun games, and it is out there and it is free. And if you're meeting in person, it's awesome. But then we had to go back and be like, okay, what's the socially distant version of this? How do you Christmas party from 6 feet apart? Okay, wait, what's the digital version of this? Like, if they can't leave their houses, what's the version? And I feel like we had 92 conversations about a project that should have been one conversation. And I keep thinking, like, that's every ministry leader. Everybody is having to have 92 meetings about things that used to be decided in 5 minutes.
So, you know, we've got a mix of people hanging out with us that, you know, that use XP3 or maybe don't use XP3. They're just kind of familiar with Orange, and they're a part of this. They're part of this community. What are some changes that you guys made when it comes to the kind of content that we're putting out there, to try to help ministries be more flexible, or, you know, pivot quicker, or be more adaptable if they did have to, you know, pull the plug and go into all digital? What are some things that you guys have adjusted or changes regarding content and how to, you know, deliver or make that kind of content accessible in a digital setting?
I think what is so interesting in this conversation is, as school has decentralized and church has decentralized and our social lives have decentralized, it feels like less and less is in our control as ministry leaders. And so what we have been doing in an attempt to help people who are able to gather in smaller groups, whether that's digitally or in person, outside or inside, is we've taken our teaching videos and our teaching scripts, and we've done these at-home and digital adaptations to them, where we basically are taking our small group guides and we're taking the 2 questions from the small group guide that go with the tension portion of the talk. And we're basically breaking the script up. So it's like, we're going to do the intro and the tension and build the tension, and then what happens is we can turn it to a conversation so that we can make it more engaging. So it's not like, students, we need you to watch a 14-minute talk and then we're going to talk afterwards. It's more like, watch these 3 minutes and let's talk. Yeah. Okay, watch 3 more minutes and let's talk. And so it's in our teaching videos, we've basically re-edited them all, and a slide comes up and says like talk about questions 1 and 2 or whatever the words on the slide say. And that way you as a ministry leader can delegate to your small group leaders. And even if you don't have the media package and you're not using the teaching videos, we've done that to the script as well, so that a ministry leader who finds themselves having to lead a conversation with their small group kids can have those discussions and make it more interactive.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I'll just chime in there to kind of piggyback off of what Ashley was saying about there is plenty of reason right now to vary your content length, right? I think we come out of a world where you sit for an hour and do something for an hour or for 30 minutes. But in the digital world where our students are existing, you can consume content as short as 10 seconds, 15 seconds, 1 second, on up to however long. And so there may be value in us remembering, like, they are digital natives, right? Our students are in the space all the time with all the options, right? All the options of what they watch, when they watch, how long they watch. And so sometimes we can be pretty, meet me here for this time, for at this moment, like, it's so restrictive sometimes the way that we try to do digital ministry. So I think just something to remember is, like, maybe there's opportunities for us to vary the types of content we create and the length of content we create.
Leslie,
that's really good.
That is so good. As you were talking, my brain kept going, yep, that's what happened with your small group. Yep, that's what happened with your girls, because my girls just graduated in the spring, but we were in lockdown just before that. And what I learned in the first 2 weeks is show up for youth group for an hour on Zoom is not going to happen. Like, we are not going to do that. They told me very quick they were not going to watch a 14-minute YouTube video and show up for a conversation. And so we started meeting 3 times a week for 30 minutes instead of 1 time a week for 90 minutes. And those 30 minutes looked different every time. And I think the bigger your ministry is, the harder that is to do. When you are a small group of 15 or 20 girls, that's possible. The bigger it is, it's hard to do. But I think you're so right. We've got to get good at varying our length and varying our frequency of meeting together, giving students something to look forward to. I mean, families are not having to drive to church if we're meeting digitally. So does that mean we could meet more often, or we could host a game night, or we could do something a little different? Does it have to be 3 songs and a 14-minute message followed by small groups, or can we switch that up a little bit? The other thing I was thinking as you were saying that is, in my own ministry context with my own group, I've gotten very good at behaving as if I am the fountain of spiritual knowledge, and if they will just come to meet with me, then I will pour that knowledge into them. And I think especially in this season, with students being in their houses more, being away from friends, away from school, away from church more, we've got to get better at leading them to lead themselves spiritually. We've got to get better at introducing what does it look like to have a personal worship time, not just a corporate worship time on Zoom? What does it look like to learn something for yourself from the Bible instead of having someone teach it to you? What does it look like to seek out community, even on the days our small group isn't meeting? I just think that we would miss it in 2021 if we didn't start having those conversations about leading yourself spiritually and leading yourself toward devotional habits and a more grown-up faith. And I know that's something our team's been talking about a lot. And in 2021, you're going to see that. You're going to see lots of focus on devotional habits and a personal faith, and an everyday, not just a Sunday kind of faith. And I think that would be really wise of all of us to begin to think about, what does it look like for teenagers to develop a personal worship time, so that whether we're together physically or digitally, it doesn't matter. But also when they graduate from our ministries and they go on, they're still able to lead themselves.
Yeah.
I love that. I have a girl in my small group who has kind of taken that for herself and has been sharing a psalm a day as she reads through the Psalms herself. And she's just posting it on Instagram. And it's amazing, like, just to see her gravitate towards a grown-up faith, like you were saying. Because we don't have to be the end all be all for them to grow closer to God, right?
Yeah, and I know that some of y'all are asking some questions in the chat, at least the one that I can see here on Zoom. I love that. If anybody has any thoughts about other people's questions, feel free to give your own thoughts on there too, and we'll try to get to some of the questions. One of them is talking about the difficulty of deciding where to really put their energy, a content-heavy live stream or a more Zoom group-based approach. Or, from the different leaders that we're kind of engaging with, or from the trends that we're seeing all over the place, which again, I know are contextual. I mean, any advice or direction that you would give to how do we prioritize the direction that we feel like that we need to go and what we put our energy in when it comes to digital content?
I think I would initially say, depending on your team, your budget, your platforms, and your students, the most important thing is consistency. Mm-hmm. So just like we always say, events like a camp or a mission trip or a service project, those are all great. But the most important thing is what happens on a weekly basis. But the timeline shrinks to a daily basis when it comes to digital consistency. So where can you be consistent? And because what happens is if it jumps from like one event to the next, sometimes it feels like you're just going from event to event rather than a continuous relationship. And so where can you be consistent? Is that your social media? Is it going live? Is it, through your small group leaders, through text message? Like, what I feel like that is the biggest thing. When you're consistent, just because they're not commenting or liking doesn't mean they're not following you and they're not listening to the content, because they might be tired of talking back. But the more consistent you are, the more likely when they need you, they will reach out, or when they're ready to re-engage or they're allowed to re-engage, then they'll reach out.
I think that's so good. And it can be so hard because there are so many different platforms and options for us to do digital ministry. Mm-hmm. And I know the way that that I'm wired, there would probably have been times in the midst of all of this that I try to use this platform and then engagement goes down. And so then I'm just like, okay, well, I'm going to jump and I'm going to try this one. And then 3 platforms in, nobody really knows where to even connect with me. And I've made the issue probably way worse than it even was if I just kind of stayed consistent with what I felt like was having the highest opportunity of engagement.
Mm-hmm. I think
Thank you, Ash.
That is that I was a part of an organization that, like, right when COVID hit, had to pivot everything to online ministry. And we're used to seeing big numbers on a weekly basis, but then you're like in your 19th like Instagram live and there's like 5 people there and you're like, what is happening? A big thing that we had to learn was anything that's a default setting on kind of social media, you can always change that up. What I mean by that is, essentially, you finish a live, it's live for 24 hours after. We saw our engagement skyrocket when we said, this is not going to be available after we post it, right? And so people came to the event the moment it was happening, because they're not like, oh, I can watch it in the next 24 hours. And so what we learned was, essentially, you can't just show up to where students are, right? I think we all get really good at showing up where students are. We're like, oh, they're on Instagram, make an Instagram account. They're on YouTube, make a YouTube account. But showing up where they are, when they're there, and how they are there, right? Which kind of for us looked like, okay, so people aren't coming to our 7 p.m. because everyone's going live at 7 p.m. on a Wednesday, right? So let's bump our time to 6:55 so they get the notification before they get everyone else's notification. So that was a small thing we were able to do. Another thing we did was, okay, scrap a 7 o'clock, let's do a midnight snack. Show up where they are, when they are, how they are. So now we're getting a whole new group of our demographic, right? We have all these students, and maybe only 20% of them are night owls, but they were there so consistently that it started kind of a subculture of gathering within our group, just because we took a different opportunity to play with the timing and that kind of thing.
Leslie, I saw that in my own group too. The later we met, the more they showed up. And I know you can't, like, on a school night be like, we're going to meet at 1 a.m. because parents are not going to love it.
Right.
But you can during the holidays, as Thanksgiving and Christmas come up, set some midnight gatherings. I don't know how I feel about the digital lock-in. That's a lot. But you can do like a 1 a.m. PJs and pancakes kind of moment, which is awesome.
And just be live for 15 minutes. Like, I think you don't even have to overdo the programming sometimes, especially if we collaborate with our students to say, what do you think this time should be? Get some of your most bought and invested students and have them help lead through what you want that time to be digitally. So.
I have a question. So Leslie, what did you all do during that 15 minutes?
Yeah, so we did a variety, starting out in the pandemic, I think like everyone, we just tried a whole bunch of everything. That ranged from, hey, we're going to play Pictionary on Instagram Live, submit the things you want drawn in this question sticker, and we just used those for the Pictionary. Or we're going to do a midnight snack, which a student would host. And so we kind of were like in all of these different students' kitchens, seeing them create things that people were commenting in the chat. You know, put mayonnaise on it, throw spaghetti in it. And then it became a very weird thing, but it wasn't us trying to be cool and be like, look at us, we're doing, like, no, it was the student leading it. And so we did a whole variety of things. Some of them were more devotional. Hey, meet me here, we're going to read a psalm, or meet me on YouTube and we're going to do a YouTube live, have the chat going, have some hosts and talk about some more heavy things. But we kind of just tried a whole bunch of different things, and the things that students showed up for consistently were the ones we kept.
I think I've heard of people, a lot of people talking about the less formal their gatherings were, the digital gatherings were, the better the students received them. I've heard a lot of people say that. So, I mean, just not from week to week, hey, this is what we're doing, this is how we're doing it, not just having a template and just filling in that template every week, but really being willing to do some other things, you know, because I think a lot of times we get so, and I know we're talking about content here, and I know we all work for Orange, a content company, but I think, you know, as we talk about, you know, that content, it's hard to be received if you don't have that relational connection with people, right? And the other weeks when you're not necessarily maybe leaning so heavily on content and you're able to just have more of a relaxed gathering, that builds your credibility in order to speak into their lives, you know, spiritually and in their faith. So I think that's super cool, Leslie. I love it.
And I would also keep in mind, like leading middle schoolers, if you have a combined environment, a lot of sixth graders and even some seventh graders may not have a phone or a tablet yet.
Yeah.
So making sure partnering with families and parents and guardians is a big priority so that they don't get forgotten. Because I know Jessica, who leads a group of sixth graders on our middle school team, I think 3 out of 12 of her girls have a phone. And so you have to talk through the parent in order to get to the kid. And so that's a whole nother obstacle. Yeah. So if anybody's figured that out really well for middle schoolers, please reach out, because we're trying to figure it out too.
Awesome. Well, ladies, like 15 more seconds left for this segment, talking about content, trying to deliver it digitally. Any last thoughts you want to share?
Don't underestimate the chat box for your introverts and processors. They like to think and then write it out. So just keep that for people like me.
I love it.
So this is new for your small group leaders too. None of them have a manual that says this is how you lead a small group in a pandemic. So give them some love, and also rethink your small group sizes, because this requires a lot more connection, a lot more personal connection, a lot more planning, and a lot more time. And there is a size at which a leader can no longer have a personal connection with every student. And especially as we go into winter months and we go into January, where depression and suicide are on the rise, make those groups small enough that a leader can connect with every student regularly.
And the last thing I would say is, whatever content you're putting out digitally, ask yourself, are you pushing information or inviting conversation? There's a big difference.